So Chris Ferris, I've actually known for a while now. Now, Chris has, modestly been listed here as a community instructor for SANS. I'm going to rephrase that a bit. Chris is an up-and-coming rockstar instructor for cloud security at SANS and has actually done an enormous amount of work in cloud security across the entire spectrum. I've had some great conversations with Chris. He's been teaching classes for quite a while now. But really, where he's done a lot of fascinating work is sort of in the day job scene at WarnerMedia, and he's done a whole lot of work developing cloud standards, building out architecture. I think, and Chris, correct me here, but I think you've gone through a couple different progressive roles at Warner. I think I remember you being the cloud security lead, and now I think you run that show. But all the way around, he's got lots of background in the space and credentials. And he's going to be talking to you guys today about multi-cloud visibility. And again, WarnerMedia, that's a large organization. So Chris, please take it away, man.
All right, now I'm off mute. Thank you, Dave, for that introduction. As he said, I lead the public cloud security practice for WarnerMedia. Sometimes I joke my job is keeping the Russians off CNN and my friends from downloading Rick and Morty. So WarnerMedia, if you're not aware, really is the combination of a lot of the Time Warner properties. So I am supporting a whole ton of different brands. And all of these different brands do their own things, and we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. But it really does bring an interesting challenge to this role. So how did this whole journey around multi-cloud visibility, really begin? It really all started with, as I like to say, a wizard showing up at a party, because that's how all good stories begin, right? Jerry reached out in Twitter, and it was, hey, I've got this thing I need to disclose to CNN. How do I reach them? And so we came back and we discovered, oh, look, he's found a whole bunch of public S3 buckets. All of those S3 buckets have CNN in the name. Well, that's interesting. But as you know, with S3, it's a global namespace. Just because the bucket says CNN doesn't mean it belongs to CNN. And so what we discovered after we went through this was one bucket was ours. A whole bunch of others were just related to people trying to do all sorts of things. Looking at some of the public information in one of the buckets, I think it was somebody trying to reverse engineer our CNN Go application. So this kind of got us thinking about, well, we need to have all of our information available to us. We had about 80 AWS accounts at the time. And so we had about 88 AWS accounts at the time. It was kind of hard to know, well, okay, are we sure this isn't our bucket? So that kind of got us going down this path. The other thing that kind of got us going down this path was internal audit. So they wanted us to do access attestations for everybody who had access, which was really interesting because now we needed to know what all accounts we have, who owns all of the accounts, who should be doing that attestation. And we actually had to get access to all of those accounts. So that kind of brought about the whole concept of creating a company security account, getting cross-account access from the security account into all of the child AWS accounts. Finally, as you know, we were going through a merger with AT&T, or acquisition with AT&T, and we got this request from the legal department, give us all your external IP addresses, including the ones in the cloud. And so it was like, well, do you want them from now or 5 minutes ago or 5 minutes from now? Because they're going to be different. So we really needed to have a way to give this information to our legal department. And then in general, cloud security is typically a dumpster fire. I think everybody so far has kind of described why that is the case. Won't belabor that point too much. So I work for WarnerMedia. You're going to see a lot of WarnerMedia memes in here. Lots of Game of Thrones. What we don't know is usually what gets us killed. I don't know if Peter Baelish actually said that on the show, but it does fit into this whole idea of let's understand what we have. CIS Critical Control, number one. Number two, have a hardware inventory, have a software inventory. Somewhere in there, 1.5 is have your cloud inventory. Know what EC2 instances you have, know what S3 buckets you have, know what Elasticsearch clusters you have. Part of the reason for building and doing this also is this global haystack. So right now we're at about 875 AWS accounts. Actually, it's probably 890 at this point. You're looking at 16 regions. That's 14,000 consoles to look in if you need to find an EC2 instance. That is not, at all feasible. Even back 2 years ago when I started doing this, and we were at 300 AWS accounts, 200 AWS accounts, that was still 4,000 consoles to look at. Completely unviable. Not only that, it's not just EC2 instances. You actually can have your developers go out and sign up for a satellite dish, or they can go and make their Elastic Container repository public. You can, and I discovered this because it was like, pick another thing. You can actually make it so that anybody who's an Amazon customer can send emails as one of your email addresses. And that doesn't even talk about the things that reInvent, or AWS announced at reInvent a couple of years back, like client VPN, which is, hey, bypass the corporate VPN as a service that kind of lives up here under the VPC thing. So we've talked about multi-account strategies. I talk about the Oprah multi-account strategy. You get an account, you get an account, everybody gets an account. And what we did with the multi-account strategy was wrap the AWS account, that tenant segmentation that was talked about yesterday. We wrapped it as a bubble of accountability. So every AWS account has a VP, and that VP is accountable for what happens on that account to both security and to finance. So why is multi-account important? I think Dave brought this one up this morning. Code spaces, remember them? Admin keys leaked, account ransom wasn't paid, and it's gone. So talking about where you've got a very large organization with a lot of different development teams, we're not one of those companies where this is the way we do it. There's one engineering team and all the products kind of go through a single single CI/CD pipeline, a single DevOps team. We do everything from HBO Max to run Ellen's websites to make sure that you see basketball games or Wolf Blitzer on CNN or TBS. All of those are very, very distinctly different technology stacks, all of them with very distinctly different business requirements, business uptimes. We can't take outages in the fall because of elections. We can't take outages in the summer because of sports. We can't have that single technology stack. So we end up with a very big set of tech sprawl, which means that we in security have to have a very wide, what's the word I'm looking for? Wide rake to find out what all people are using in their accounts. So I like to say diversity is good in people, but when you're doing it in tech stacks, team culture, engineering process, that becomes a very significant challenge. So what do? We built a tool called Antiope. And lots of accounts make in lots of regions make for that big haystack. We looked at enterprise tooling, still ridiculously expensive. We went through a repricing exercise on that recently. AWS config service has gotten better, but it still doesn't capture all of the resources that we like to use. We want to track and identify what accounts we're trusting. So anybody can go and trust their home Amazon account and have a backdoor in. So we need to know, why are we trusting this account? Where did this AMI come from? What is this account that has a bucket policy that we have granted access to? What is this account that can assume role into our account? Is it a known vendor that's doing, cloud health monitoring kind of thing? Or is it somebody who just said, I'm going to backdoor it in because I don't like having to use MFA to get into these accounts? It gives us a search engine to help find the big gaping security holes. And so we did take this. It's a generic thing. We open sourced it. My team is currently building out and about ready to release the Azure component to it. So we'll start discovering Azure subscriptions and virtual machines. And just in case you didn't know how to pronounce it, because even I didn't know how to pronounce it, it's Antiope. What does it look like? Looks like a typical serverless spaghetti diagram. But a couple key points here that I think are important. It's very easy to add a new inventory check. It's not a monolithic thing. So if I want to go and discover AWS ground station, because I need to know if we're using any satellite dishes, I just write a check for that. And if I put it on this topic, boom, it hits all of my accounts. I have set it up so that when we discover a brand new account, we can do things. We can trigger external automations. We used that for GuardDuty a while back. And then finally, we have a whole set of custom reporting, things that are very specific to our enterprise, where we're leveraging Antiope to build us custom reports. Large list of things that it monitors. A couple interesting ones: support cases. We'll talk about that in a minute. Trusted advisor. VPNs, VPCs, direct connect. Our security operations team wants to know if they see an event in a EC2 instance, whether or not that VPC has access back on-prem. So as I said, we have some custom things that we wanted to do with it. So we try and make this a very decoupled system. So you can easily add custom Lambda to that inventory SNS topic. You can add step functions that will run after the main step function executes. This allows us to pull all of our inventory data now from ServiceNow. So we need to know who our accounts are. Sorry, just saw Slack. Distracted. We need to know who our accounts are, who the executive sponsors are, and pull them in so that we can generate our custom reports. Other custom reports, we have a list of all of our EC2 instances. We have a list of all of our healthy security agents. We can use that to get a list of all of our EC2 instances that don't have security agents. And that feeds into our compliance system. Word to the wise on any kind of security tooling you want to build: don't put your Lambdas in everybody's account. We got bit with this one. It's a lot easier if you put your Lambdas in your security account and leverage cross-account roles to read what's going on in the child account. You've got one Lambda to manage, not 800 Lambda to manage. So what is this really sort of enabled for us? So on account management, kids these days with their control towers and organizational admins. Back in my day, we had to write Lambda to enable GuardDuty and CloudTrail. And that's true, up until very recently, within the last month or so, there really was no automatic way to turn on GuardDuty when a new account was created. It's been a while, but there really wasn't a way to automatically set up CloudTrail when an account was created. So this auto discovery capability allowed us to auto enroll each one of these accounts as they were created. For centralized GuardDuty, we feed all of our GuardDuty into a centralized account. And then we push that to Splunk through HEC cluster. Again, make sure you do that in all regions. But now we have distributed centralized guard duty. One account in the organization can now control all the guard duty. Of course, I have 8 guard duty pairs. Actually, I think I've got 10 right now, or 10 organizational accounts. But 10 organizations and configuring guard duty in those is still way significantly easier than doing it for 800. So what did this give to the vulnerability management program? First of all is inventory. All the discovered attributes of the account from the payer record are in there. We've got the account ID, the root email, but then we also have those custom attributes. Executive sponsor, data classification. We get all the data in from ServiceNow. Antiope has kind of become that aggregation point for all of our cloud data. You go back to the first slide and you see all of the different business units that are part of WarnerMedia. We have almost that many ServiceNow and inventory systems. So how does security, the one security team, bring all of that together to then fan it back out into all of our existing tooling? The other piece that we're really doing is our compliance and cloud security posture monitoring. So for that, we kind of leverage something called, or a product called CloudSploit. They have an open source engine. So we run that as just yet another Lambda that leverages the cross-account role. Antiope orchestrates all of that data collection. So Antiope goes in, it gathers up, does all of the compliance checking. We feed that into scorecards, so you get spreadsheet reports. And from those spreadsheet reports, we feed that into our vulnerability management tool we call Brinca. So for the security operations and incident response group, they now have a quick and easy way to get into every single AWS account. So we have the cross-account audit role. We build them this web page. It tells them who they need to reach out to if there's an issue. It gives them the link they need to immediately go into that account and check something out. We give them all of this data in Splunk. Our team works entirely in Splunk. So they need to know, hey, is there a security group that is open to the world? This is where it is. This is what that IP address is. We also put it all into Elasticsearch. So we use Splunk for our humans, and our Lambda all talk to the Elasticsearch. So on the threat hunting piece, a good example from a year or two back was what public Elasticsearch clusters existed in our environment. To do that, first thing we did was wrote the check to say, go tell me all my Elasticsearch clusters. About an hour later, that was fed into Splunk. At that point, then it was, okay, go through and look for, all right, well, that doesn't have an endpoint. It's got a, splat in the principal thing. And here's the list of, oh, look, all right, well, we've got some hits. Go deal with it. But other more topical threat hunting is what security groups have 4505 or 4506 open. So when we had a 0-day salt stack bug show up and we needed to know, crap, where is that exposed? We could just as easily go into Splunk and say, from port 4505 to port 4506. I made a comment in Slack just now that, holy cow, Finger still works on Mac. So I was like, do we have Finger running anywhere in our cloud environment? And if you don't know what Finger is, it's like from the mid 90s, early 90s. Actually, it's probably from Unix in the 70s, but last time I saw it was the 90s. And it just tells you, is somebody logged into the machine? And it cats a file that they put in their home directory. Not exactly something that you would want running in a modern system. But I could quickly go and say, do we have any Finger in here? And thankfully we did not. Bringing all of the data together, bringing in the support tickets, we now have the ability to capture any of these kind of notices. And so this is what you'll see when you put your AWS key and secret in GitHub. You'll get an email from AWS in about 10 minutes that says, hey, look, your account is compromised. Everybody's got access. But Amazon sends that to the root email address. If your security team isn't on the root email address, do you know who is monitoring that? By API querying and hitting all of these support tickets that are being generated in our account, not only do we have a good idea of what tools and services teams are thinking about using, but we can also quickly capture any kind of notices that come in from AWS abuse. A couple other advantages to all of this are outside of the security realm, but really pertinent to cloud in general. So I often get hit with or get asked, what is this IP that's hitting our service? You know, you've got multiple different teams, they're all in the cloud, they're all in different VPCs. Sometimes they're going out across the internet to talk to each other. Hey, where's this IP address? It's an Amazon IP. Is it ours? We can quickly go into Splunk and say, oh, all right, well, this 53 address is this VPC in this AWS account. It's a NAT gateway for this subnet. You want to go talk to John Doe. And so we can quickly and easily find and answer these questions that the engineering teams bring to us. Oftentimes, we've got DNS that's hosted in an account different from potentially where the application is. So when somebody needs to make a DNS update, they don't know which of the 800 accounts necessarily to go to. We know where all of our DNS zones are at all times. EBS volumes and snapshots, those can, one, be made public, and that becomes a security issue. But even as long as they exist, they're a finance issue. You're paying money to hold on to this data. And if there's no good reason for the business to hold on to this data, we can generate reports to hand back to finance to say, hey, look, I found where you can save that $50,000 a month that you're looking to save. Instance tagging. Another good one is Route 53 domains. So I don't know how many have a really good ticketing process with their legal department to go and register domains. But our legal department doesn't use ServiceNow. So a lot of times the easy way to get something done is whip out your credit card and go to GoDaddy. And that is horrible because then we have no visibility. Route 53 domains has become their second go-to place for this. And the nice thing about the Route 53 domains route is because we have that visibility, we quickly pull up a report, and once a week we can shoot it over to legal with, hey, here's a list of all the domains that have been registered. And they can decide, well, no, this needs to be managed by legal, or, well, yeah, you just set that up as a test thing, or as an engineering function, just you've set it up fine, keep it where it is. I like to say architect for the AWS you have, not the AWS you want. A lot of what we've built over time has been related to, well, we can't do this or we can't do that, or we're in 8 payers or whatever else. There are other ways to do this other than writing your own software. AWS organization multi-account capabilities are getting better. So, you talk about delegated admin and trusted access, make this problem a lot less hard. But again, nothing crosses AWS organizational boundaries. So if you're a security team and you're responsible for multiple AWS organizations, you still have to build something to orchestrate that for you. AWS config service is pretty good. Antiope does much of what the AWS config recorder will do, but we don't have to deploy it in 800 accounts in 16 regions, which you still have to do even with the new feature they announced the other night. I think Antiope is a little bit cheaper. We have not yet actually turned on recorder everywhere. But the multi-account, multi-aggregator rules are a good option if you want to go this route. There's also CloudMapper. So for a discovery of what's in your accounts, Scott Piper's tool really is good. It started off with being for visualizations, but he's really kind of wrapped it in a container, taught it to do the whole cross-account piece, and you can really operationalize your discovery with CloudMapper. A lot of what we talk about in cloud is really becoming down to a build versus buy. On the build side, you get a lot of intimacy with Bodo 3 and the features of the specific API calls. I discovered that ENIs can actually have an account owner to them. Haven't dug into too deeply why that is, but there's some very interesting things you get when you start actually making these API calls. Show me all my instances, show me all my Elasticsearch clusters, show me all my S3 buckets. You understand a lot about the cloud when you do that. You definitely get exactly what you need out of it. Of course, the issue there is now you've built it, you own it. So if you don't have a large engineering team, you're going to end up having to support this tool because now everybody depends on it. On the buy side, fast to market. There's no coding, no downloading, no figuring out how it works. On the buy side, you don't have to go and hire engineers to support the product for you, but you're still, slave to the product roadmaps, and you're always paying a perpetual annual license charge for it. So whereas with something you build, it's capital. With something you buy, you're not hiring people and managing them, but you're still shoveling that money out the door every month. So a few parting thoughts. You said the cloud was secure, but only when you secure it. Some of the future things that we're working on, as I said, Azure support coming very soon. Interesting thing about us is we now have multiple Azure tenants. So Warner Brothers, Turner, HBO Latin America, et cetera, et cetera. We have the same need to do that. So we're building out, we're going to release shortly this idea of go discover all my subscriptions across all my tenants. Still requires a read-only role, service principal, applied at the management group in each of those tenants. There's no way to discover the gray clouds, as was coined yesterday. But once you know, hey, we have this agreement in place, give me read-only access, now you know where everything is spread. Another thing that we're working on is what we're going to call the Azure Perimeter Scanner. So with Azure Perimeter Scanner, we now know all of these S3 buckets. We know all of these security groups. Why don't we actually just poke at those? This isn't a Nessus just go run port scans across all these IP addresses. It's, hey, we know this is public. Let's see what we actually get back from it. Hey, we see this S3 bucket is public. Let's go list the objects and present that back to the business with, so you sure this is what you want to make available? Elasticsearch is a great example. Go hit those Elasticsearch clusters, show them a list of indexes, show them a list of actual data that's in there. Nothing is more horrifying than seeing a blob of JSON show up on Twitter from, I can't remember the guy's name, the one who's been doing a lot of the data breach discovery stuff. So, the UpGuard teams. So when you see and present it to somebody that way, it's a lot more impactful than saying, hey, yeah, you have a port open and you're not supposed to have a port open, so please don't do that. Rather than, hey, look, I'm able to, start brute forcing your RDP. And by the way, you didn't notice I was doing that, so perhaps you should close that. And then we're putting together these kind of hunt scripts. So I talked a little bit about the Elasticsearch. Other scripts that can kind of run against this Elasticsearch cluster to go find things and give you sort of a way to get started with, now you have all the data. You've taken all the needles from 4,000 different locations, you've put them all in one place. What do we do next with it? And of course, The reason for this is the cloud is dark and full of terrors. So with that, I'll take some questions. This has got all of the contact information where you can go download the latest version of Antiope. On my website, there are notes, basically a write-up of the same presentation if you want to read it. And other than that, I'll take the questions.
Sure. Awesome session, Chris. One of the things that I kind of took away was some of the existing good security fundamentals like applies to the cloud, right? Like you need to like have your inventory, right? If you don't have inventory, how can you protect the stuff that you want? And then, you want everything to be like the same. So it's very manageable. You can't have all these custom configurations all over the place, right? Otherwise, your stuff it'd be really, really hard to manage at that kind of a scale. So I thought that was like,
it
really
is,
useful.
but sometimes the business doesn't let you say this is the one way we're going to do it.
No, totally. But you have to have those APIs. It has to come through your flow. Otherwise, it's really, really hard to manage, right? Like it's outside the thing.
Yep.
So a lot of people really like this tool. So we have a couple questions that they posted in the hallway. The first one was, does Antiope use native ServiceNow components, visual trackboard, or is there a lot of customization in the snow development to get the integrations?
It was we were given an API from the ServiceNow teams. And so it's actually part of that customization stack is go hit the ServiceNow for this division, go hit the ServiceNow for that division.
Right.
And so once we get that, then it kind of just feeds into the Dynamo database that we use for everything else. There's the discovery of accounts and everything else was using the ServiceNow discovery capabilities. So we actually had a different cross-account role that we put into everybody's account within the last year that will go and discover all of the accounts at the organizational level and discover a subset of what Antiope does. But mostly what that is discovering is for different kind of programs around vulnerability management, firewall rules, some other things.
The second question was, do you filter or correlate any events before forwarding to HEX, or I'm not sure what that means, Michael, HECS, or is everything forwarded raw?
With guard duty, we forward everything raw, and HEC is HTTP event collector for Splunk. We forward everything raw. We do our filtering within Splunk. So in that case, that was for guard duty. When we send all the Antiope events, we send those in every hour when this runs for almost all of the resources. So we don't do what config does, which is necessarily wait for a change to occur before we inventory the file. It's a lot more basic in that every single file or every single resource that we discover and inventory gets pushed to HEC and gets pushed into Splunk.
Gotcha. Next question. How did you gain executive buy-in to support these new efforts? And are there lessons learned you want to share?
So I'd be curious to know which specific efforts. So I'll take that one a little bit generically and we can chat on that one in the Slack. But we kind of didn't have a choice with you've got to give us read-only access. There was an internal audit that basically said everybody had to do that. But even that took a good 3 or 4 months of, so who really owns this account? Is there anything running in it? Can we turn it off? That was sort of like most of my 2017.
I think maybe the question's more of like, you said it's either build versus buy.
The build or buy?
Yeah, and like how did that go about and kind of, because this is quite the effort, I'm guessing, to kind of not only build this all out, but then also maintain it and keep it. Then, like you said, like add new features to it and all that kind of stuff. Like that's quite a bit of effort goes into managing something like this.
I don't know if we ever actually explicitly had that decision. It started off with, hey, we need to know how many buckets we have and we needed to know how many IP addresses, and we didn't have budget for a tool that would do that. And really, to be honest, there weren't that many tools that would. So it was kind of, it started with we need to know if we have that. We need to know if we have that. And at some point or another, I put together enough scripts that it was like, well, we should just put this in a framework.
Exactly.
And so I just started coding. And at that point, it was just part of my job to be able to answer these questions, to be able to get these resources in. And then it just kind of blew out from there. But I think at some point or another, management was like, well, let's just use Antiope for that. Let's just, pull that in from Splunk and everything else. And then the system kind of became mission critical.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that with other stuff where it's like these little things kind of start out and they kind of have like, as they get bigger, they start to have like their own kind of like gravity to it. It starts pulling other stuff into it and keeps like kind of growing outwards because that's where everyone else's stuff is. So let's just use that, and it just keeps like kind of expanding in scope. Yeah.
Yep. And it's become the central core point. Lessons learned. So within the last year, as the Time Warner companies became one WarnerMedia, there was the different groups that were in charge of things, and I really thought it was going to be easy to, hey, we've built this program, just go do this and we'll all be good. And that's not there. All of those different teams have their own different ways of doing things.
Yep.
And there's no, we're not finance, we're not healthcare. There's no, well, you have to do this because HIPAA says so. You have to do this because whatever says so.
Pushing down on them to do it, right? You have to
and there's no pressure on executive management to do it either. So, I mean, there's no, so getting the buy-in really becomes a conversation with 800 and, well, it's not that many because everybody's got a prod and a non-prod and some have multiple accounts, but it's probably 300 different conversations of, hi, we're cloud security. We're here to help. Hey, I noticed you have 3389 open to the world. Do you mind closing that? Oh, you need to know how to do a bucket policy, right? Well, here's how to do that kind of thing. And then we kind of also combine that with, hey, I noticed you had 3 cloud trails. If you put our cloud trail in, we'll give you the data back and you can save yourself X number of dollars. And so those are, if you can find a way to get security and save your account owners some money in whatever cloud, that would be the one thing to think about. I look at cloud governance as really almost a 3-legged stool. You've got security, you've got the money, and then you've got what you're actually trying to deliver, the performance and operations aspect of it. And all 3, as Thanos says, have to be in balance for you to have a really healthy cloud program. So security can't just be saying, well, we want Macy in all of our buckets. Macy in all of our buckets, we wouldn't have been able to, afford Game of Thrones. So you've got to be able to say, well, we're going to do that, but we're only going to do it here. Hey, I see you're wasting some money here. Let's go do something different, and think about it holistically, not just from the, well, Macy's a good tool because we need to do X to check a box. Let's make everybody spend, $100 million a year.
One of the questions I had for you was, you mentioned, I believe you said every account is tied to a CVP from a security and financial. Did I get that right? You said that each something was tied to. Each account
has an executive sponsor that is accountable to security and finance for all of the activities of the account.
So has anything happened that you can share that they were held accountable, or like something did change for that? Because I think that's a good way to do that in terms of making somebody that has the positional power to like make changes and stuff like that, holding them accountable. But has anything happened that you can share or anything with that?
So I think the big piece was the scorecard system that I talked about at the summit last year, where we kind of almost gamified the get your account compliance scores to 100%. And so we've kind of flipped that on its head. So now we're actually trying to drive vulnerabilities down to 0. But because we have now the ability to quickly API call and get all this data, and we know who all the VPs are and how many accounts they have, we get to the point where we can start putting together these spreadsheets and PowerPoints that basically say, hey, look, here's the worst VP in the company. Here's the best VP in the company. So that part of the accountability process. And then the other thing is that the account owners, in many cases, own the budget for the cloud account. So if they're popped and a crypto miner takes over, guess what? Their trading budget is nuked for the year. And so that's where I think, a lot of that accountability comes in. But we try and hold them accountable through the vulnerability management program, which is really what's responsible for all of the cloud security posture problems.